I think is inexcusable what Apple did with the M2 MacBook Pro and the SSD choice that they made there. Quite rightly, this generated a lot of noise, and some people are kind of jumping to the conclusion that the M2 MacBook Air will have the same issue, causing the M2 MacBook Air to face CPU throttling, overheating, and generally being quite slow. But should you worry about this really being the case with the M2 MacBook Air? I made a couple of videos about this subject, and a lot of you have asked me about why I chose the potentially doomed configuration. And I hope I made that clear by now, but many of you are still concerned about this, and because of all that noise and the sensational aspect of it. I don't really like to join in on that. I don't think it's, I'm usually the last person to defend Apple, and anything that Apple does. To be clear, my current position on Apple in general is they are 100% profit focused. They are misleading with their marketing, as I've shown in previous videos as well. But when it comes to the MacBook Air, I think we really just simply have to wait until the real tests come in. I think I know exactly what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, this guy hasn't got the MacBook Air yet. It's coming, don't worry. Apple are not sending me a free MacBook Air, I wish. Obviously, embargo just lifted, and I have just watched all the big YouTubers who Apple did send the laptop to. And I have to say, this video still applies, so bear with me. I think it's a big jump to assume that it will suck. So here's why I think it's a bit too early to condemn the M2 MacBook Air, especially in that 256 gig configuration. The first reason is the type of usage. The second is the software aspect. And the third is people's preference. With the type of usage, it's always tricky to generalize, but bear with me here. A lot of people who Apple are targeting this machine at are people, like students, young professionals who just want to get on with work and not have to worry about battery life, for example. They want to watch some high quality content as well when they get home or whatever, when they're relaxing, and be able to have a decent FaceTime call with their family and friends. Maybe the occasional gaming and kind of light photo and video editing. Nothing too crazy, they're not going to be running multiple pro apps at the same time, processing dozens of raw images in Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom. They might be using those applications, but not to the extent that it would cause the M2 MacBook Air to struggle, like, rendering a 4K video in Final Cut Pro at the same time as having a 50-60 tab open in Chrome. The second aspect, the software aspect, is important as well, right? I know this is potentially a stretch here, so bear with me again, but it's not impossible that some software updates might still be required for the M2 chip, in the MacBook Air configuration specifically. Like I said, it's a stretch because it's not that different to the M1 architecture, right? But the fact that it can't cool itself, it's a different chassis. The MacBook Air doesn't have a fan, so that is different, right? And that should be a factor in my view. The other factor is that SSD configuration that is being doomed by the M2 MacBook Pro. If Apple did use the same approach as they did with the M2 MacBook Pro and used a single NAND chip to save costs, wouldn't some apps need to be updated to make sure that they are aware of this, single channel issue? I'm not a developer, so I could be talking out of my backside here. If you are a dev, please let me know. I'm always learning. I'm always curious to know what really goes on, under the hood. Try not to kill me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to know, is this a real thing, or am I just imagining it? And the third aspect, perhaps the most important, is your preference. Even if your workload means you have to upgrade the M2 MacBook Pro to say, 16 gig or 24 gig RAM and a 512 or maybe 1 terabyte SSD, and you know damn well, right, that it will cost the same, if not more, than the 14-inch MacBook Pro. But if it's your preference, and you like that form factor of the MacBook Air, then that to me trumps everything else. No one can tell you otherwise. I'm nobody, right, in this situation. As I said in my previous videos, the information online is great, and this sort of thing, the videos that I produce, hopefully kind of helps you to be informed. But your case is very unique, so of course take all the information you need, but make your final decision based on what's more important to you. A lot of you are also concerned about the throttling issues, the stuff that's generating a lot of heat online, if you pardon the pun. But yeah, some of these issues that have been seen on the M2 MacBook Pro. And sure, that's another great find. I think it's amazing what those guys are doing online, kind of literally tearing things apart and trying to find issues. But in this case, I have, hand in heart, I have to say, I don't really think there are genuine use cases. Those throttling issues seem to happen under some crazy conditions, like exporting 8K videos. And I think I've said enough about the matter now, but you have to be realistic about those tests. But when it comes to the M2 MacBook Air, taking into account what I just said about those reasons I mentioned, someone has already seen, based on some early benchmarks, you know how much I love those, but they have some indication, you know, early on that on the throttling side of things, you know, that was seen on the M2 MacBook Pro, it does not seem to be a problem with the M2 MacBook Air. In fact, the Air performs a tiny bit better based on those results. Is that going to be a perceptible difference? This is where I'll come in, so make sure you are subscribed because I will be using this machine, like properly using it. You know, YouTube is a bit weird sometimes, by the way, and they don't seem to show my videos to the right audience, so I would really appreciate if you like this video anyway, to give it a thumbs up. It really helps. I'm still a small channel, still kind of trying to grow this. And I have pre-ordered the M2 MacBook Air, so you can expect lots more videos about it, the best accessories for it and things like that. And the other benefit to you is that I'm here at least once a week with a new down-to-earth tech video for you. Right, I'm not gonna be testing the MacBook Air through benchmarks, but actually putting some real work through it, right? I will leave a link to the benchmark video I mentioned here anyway, but basically, it doesn't prove anything in my view. It shows positive signs, but to me, those benchmark videos are quite dubious sometimes. Just making sure that I'm balanced here as well. I always like to consider both sides of the story. But I think those benchmark videos, to me anyway, always seem a little bit dubious, right? Because, and I understand it, they haven't got enough time to sometimes test everything in every single scenario. But they're quite often testing one thing, in this case, the CPU in this video that I mentioned earlier. And also in this video that I mentioned earlier, they were just using one source, which is Geekbench, which doesn't really represent real usage. You know, to make a machine throttle, without getting into a lot of detail here, you know, but you have to put it under some serious stress, you know, like getting the GPU and CPU to max out at the same time repeatedly, not just one run. Running a benchmark test once and only testing one aspect, like the CPU, will tell you something. I'm not denying that, sure, but not enough that, you know, to represent a real world usage. Ultimately, as I said in my last two videos, if you're even slightly concerned that the workflow that you've got, you know, will struggle on this machine, then you probably need more processing power and proper cooling in the first place anyway. And that's just not the MacBook Air. I'd say the MacBook Pro would be a better way to go for you. Not long till I get mine now, and I can't wait to share my findings here and do some proper reviews for you. I still think what Apple did with the M2 MacBook Pro is proper shady and inexcusable, as I said, but let's get the M2 MacBook Air first in our hands, try it out with our proper kind of real world scenarios before we assume it's a write-off, right? So what I'm doing and what I recommend all my friends and family to do, and maybe you as well, is to kind of, you know, don't let all the hype from Apple marketing, the usual YouTube scaremongering, get some practical examples, like some of the ones that I've shared in this playlist here for you. And YouTube reckons that you might like this other video I did over here. I hope they're right, and I hope to see you there.